Show the screen. Thank you, Rita. And in front of you, I hope you can see a chart. It's the half hour of the S&P future. Right, okay, so here's Tom Williams.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, it's Tom Williams here, speaking to you from Worthing in Sussex, UK. It's a little resort town on the coast, about 50 miles south of London, I suppose. And I've got Peter here, who's a computer expert, and Rita, his wife, who's developed as a trader, very good too. And she's also a great typist, and she's answered. Unfortunately, folks, I've been at this too long now, and my eyesight's deteriorating. So I have to have Peter and Rita here to help me. I'm sorry for that, but I can still see the chart, and I'm the one who developed this program originally. But I developed it to be used with a computer. But of course, the original ideas came from Richard D. Wyckoff, who lived over 100 years ago. Now, for those who are new, I know there is a few here that are new. What we do, right? We don't use any mathematical formulas. We don't use anything fancy or clever like that. What we do is to track what Gavin calls the smart money. And the smart money are the professional traders that all these businesses have. And they will flood the market with 50, 100,000 contracts. And they bully their way into the market, shall we say. And that's what we look for. We look to see what the volume is. We look to see on that volume below those vertical lines, on that amount of volume, which is relative. We still don't want to know the numbers. We use what we call relative volume, right? That's relative to the previous volumes. And what we want to know is, on that volume, what did the market actually do? And you will find that the market does move on supply and demand. In other words, if demand is greater than supply, then the market goes up. If there's more supply that is selling by the big players, then the markets will fall. Of course, there's a lot of devious goings on in between that, which you will gradually learn about and pick up. But it's very, very interesting. And once, really the chart is a language speaking to you, sort of like Braille in a way, right? And once you learn to read the chart, you will have that skill and knowledge with you for the rest of your life. And there's very, very few people in the world that can do this. Now, why that is, I suppose somebody has to trigger it all off, I suppose, but professional money, they obviously understand. They can read the market straight away. What I say to people is that computers, when you try to compute a program, right, you've either got it right or you haven't, because computers simply do not understand mistakes in your thinking, or you've got it wrong, and they just don't want to know. And therefore, if you get it wrong, then signals will look really, really poor, and so on and so on. But there's a logic to even the ones that look poor, which I'll show you in a minute. But so we've got signals here. This is a 30-minute chart of the S&P 500 at the moment. You can see, if you put the cursor over a bar with an arrow, there's a red arrow, look. What's that, Peter? There is a Yeah, there is a dialog box that goes with all these signals. Look, one there, right? And that's, what's that say? Yeah, so a buying climax is when people rush into the market because they think it's going on up forever. Professional money, right, who bought at lower levels will unload into that buying, right? And it's that that alters the balance of supply and demand. And there's a nice little example, 30-minute chart here. Now, basically, what I tend to talk about is more the short moves suitable for scalping. That I find at my age a bit more exciting. You can take a few $100s off these people and then go and have a nice cup of tea in the garden or something, and that's it. But it all depends who and what you are. If you're a fund manager, then obviously you look at weekly, even monthly charts, and once you understand it, but it might be difficult, tricky at start to get your head around it because it's probably a completely new way of looking at the market. I mean, you'll never be told this, ever. You'll never see this on television. You'll never see this in newspapers because they just simply don't understand it. They don't seem to understand. They seem to think that everything revolves and goes on news. Now, you will learn shortly or very quickly with us that imagine you are a professional trader, right? Well, even if you're a second-hand car dealer, you do the same thing. You polish a car up, right, if you want to sell it. Make it all look shiny and beautiful, right? Change the mats, change this, do this, nice new tires and everything. So, right. So you want to sell it as a professional, and then somebody has to come in and buy it off you. It's the same thing goes on in the market. As they mark it up, don't forget they can mark these prices up or down, more or less at will in a way, and they mark it up on good news, right? And then on that good news, then when the people come rushing in to buy, then they say, right, okay, we'll let them have some of our holdings now that we bought at lower levels. And that's what goes on. And then, of course, the market can't collapse immediately. They need to hold it up so it could sell more on the next wave up. And so it goes on. Excuse me. So here we have two signals right at the top, look. Now, even this one here, this is probably no demand there, look. So you've got a warning on 3 bars, look. Now, even here, look, we've got a red arrow here. What's that say, Pete? Supply, right. Now, we have what we call an alert here. Now, whenever you see, especially if it's no demand, and you'll get to know what no demand signal means is. No demand is they've marked the market up. Professional money are not particularly, they may be nervous or whatever, but they hold their horses and they sit back and watch. And that results in an up move on no demand. But if they're still bullish or feel they could go up, they have a test. So whenever you see a test after a red arrow, and lo and behold, there it is, look. Test, the dialog box tells you all this. Look, there's loads there. Plenty, look, to read. Right. I'm not sure how many signals we've got in there now. We've got quite a few. I know we're talking about 80 or 90 or something like that of these various signals. But look, they're testing. That's why it's gone up, look. That is a test. A test is their testing of supply. And whenever you see a down bar, right, and the volume is less than the previous two, and it closes up middle or high, and the spread is narrow down, that's a test. Look, and there it is. Right, so up they go. They reach the top, then they move sideways here. Look at the volume coming in here. There's a hell of a lot of supply there. So they say, right, now what would you do, right, if you were unloading as a professional? We know you unloaded there quite a bit, and even there, we know that. Now, so you say to yourself, now wouldn't that be nice if we could mark this market up, catch all those stops? There's some lovely, there's thousands of them up there, look. Let's try to get as many as we can, and we'll mark it up. So they mark it up, bang, up they go. It's usually on no demand. Yeah, so there you are. That's an example of no demand. Right, so read those dialog boxes, please. And that's a typical test. That's a principle of VSA, a test, a true test, or an upthrust, look. Sorry, not a test, sorry. Upthrust, look, appears after weakness. And there's the weakness. You've got 3 bars there of weakness. 30-minute chart. Okay, so a true upthrust, we call that an upthrust, appears after we've seen signs of weakness, usually at a similar level. And there's coming off. Now, don't forget, though, but they like to hold the market up because they'll have a hell of a lot to distribute or short or whatever they want to do. Right? But it's an unfolding story. Unfolding story, day by day. Now, I like to see trend lines on my charts. Could you draw a trend line on that, Peter, for me? Well, put a few more bars up. Now, a trend line, the first 2 points of support and the first point of supply. Now, trend lines, why they work, I can't tell you. Yeah, there and there. It's that low and the first high. That's it. That's it. Now, that was a trend. From that point, it should really be down here, but doesn't matter. It's near enough. So that's all right. So when we reached up here, look, we are overbought, which makes you even more vulnerable to come off. Trend lines show the general direction the road's going in, look. But when you're over it, you've crossed over the top and you're what they call overbought. In other words, you're extremely vulnerable to one or more groups coming in and selling. And of course, when it hits the lows here, you're also very vulnerable to one or more groups coming in and thinking, well, we could buy a few in, take it up a bit. Okay. Now, if you've got any questions about this particular chart, Reese is sitting in front of the screen and you type in the question. Right.
So Edmund is saying, are we seeing a little distribution in this area? Every time it goes to 1955, the price gets rejected. So he's talking about up here, Tom. That's, yeah?
Supply level. I mean, the word distribution may be a bit harsh at the moment. We're not sure. You see, markets, when they've been running a bull market like this one has been for many months, even a year, right? If you look at the weekly chart, you'll see it. Incidentally, what's very useful is what I call the simple trading system. And the simple trading system, how that works is that if the market is bullish, right, and once it starts to become bullish, right, the bars become blue. Up, 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 up. You allow for 1 or 2 down bars, ignore level bars, right, up. And that's what I call the simple trading system, because you'll find when you're trading, just a warning first, especially to newcomers, don't trade anything until you really know what you're doing, because they're a devious lot, they're a cunning lot, and they're not there for your benefit, believe me. They're there to take money off you as quickly as possible. And the way to avoid that is to be able to read the chart properly, and don't make a trade unless you see an obvious principle at work. That may take time. I mean, Rita here, she specializes in what we call up thrusts. Right, we pull her leg a lot about that, but she doesn't mind because she makes money out of them. And but perhaps she'll tell you a little bit about that sometime. Now, she's only been trading about 3-4 years, and she's very good at it. And Peter here, he's very good too. He's picking it all up very, very rapidly. But it takes time. Anything new takes time. You've got to get your head around this. As I was saying the other day, if you want to buy a house, for example, you'll go to your real estate agent, and he'll show you the house, and he'll give you a pamphlet on it, several pages, and you look at it, and you see this, that. Now, all the facts that you're told, right, you may not believe them totally, but you think, well, they must be right. You've seen it with your own eyes. It's a nice house, it's this and that, right? You have a survey, and you believe what the guy says to you on the survey. The trouble with the stock market, you can't believe anything you're told. It's unfortunate, but that's it. I mean, I've heard we've sat in the office here laughing at some of the things we've heard on the news and one thing and another. I mean, but you'll get your head around that. But you're dealing with human beings, right? And they're a devious lot when they get going, as you know, and they're not there for anybody else's benefit but their own. But the trading system, well, the idea of the trading system, I've had many people ring me up and say, oh, yeah, Tom, I got in, okay. However, I sold out at 10 o'clock and it went on up, you know. Oh, now, the trading system works on a 5-minute, all sorts of time frames, because it's following what the professional money do. Once the professional money are in a position, in other words, they put their money in and then they're marking it up. To keep it going, they have to make sure that the close is always higher than the close of the previous bar, because the big danger to professional players with all those contracts or all that money is that other groups, they're no friends of the stock market, remember, other groups will sell into their up move, and so they lose money. Mind, some professionals do lose. A lot of professionals do lose money. But they have to be really, really careful. And so they make sure that the close is higher than the close of the previous bar on whatever instrument they are trading or in, should we say. Okay. I mean, I can never follow any script or anything, as you could probably realize. I always talk off the top of my head. I was a professional trader for 15 years in Beverly Hills, and so I picked all this stuff up. And when IBM announced their desktop computer, I thought, right, I wonder if what my knowledge, or part of it, which is Wyckoff's original thoughts, right, I wonder if that can be computerized. I knew nothing about computers, absolutely nothing. I still don't, be quite honest. Except I know you have to get your facts right. You either get it right or it just doesn't work. So that's how I got into this. I found a programmer. Funny enough, he'd just come out of the army, and he was a tank instructor. And of course, modern day tanks, right, you don't look at with binoculars perhaps like you used to. Now there's all these radar and screens inside the tank. Have got screens just like your computer screen, and that's how they see the world, and that's where he learnt all his development, early days. So, but it seemed to work. He knew what he was doing. We are developing a new program, excuse me, which we've got Gregory. He's a Russian programmer in Moscow. He appears to know what on earth I'm talking about. I've had 8 programmers over the years, and most of them, well, all of them, don't know what you're talking about. That's the problem, right? But occasionally you meet somebody like Gregory who seems to know what I'm talking about. He seems to get into grips with it. So let's hope it's going to be an automatic system, which is what you really, really need, I suppose, because the biggest hold-up to making money in the stock market, believe it or not, is you. You're the problem. You're the one that reads and listens to tips and news. You're the one that gets gut feelings. You're the one that's misled, mainly with a gut feeling. I mean, IG Index, apparently, that's a bookmaker in England. They surveyed a big database one day on whether the market was bullish or bearish. 92% have got it wrong. They said it was this and it was the opposite. So, and the reason for that is, of course, all these people are reading and listening and seeing the same things, and that's what they're getting out of it. So you've got to be very, very careful. And remember, you're looking at professional money. You're looking at them coming into the market, which has to be on a down bar after you've seen a fall. And that's picked up, we call that stopping volume, with the high volume and down bar, narrow spread, telling you very clearly that professional money has come into the market big time. And it's that alters the supply and demand. If there's more demand, right, and less supply, the market's going to go up. So that's how it works. And that's what these signals are based on. That's all. There's no mathematical formulas, nothing clever like that. Question, right?
I'm talking about down bars. Pete says there were actually a couple of people asking about the test after a shakeout. On some charts, the down bar will give a signal called a test after a shakeout, but I don't see a shakeout bar in the background. The down move leading up to that bar, is that considered the shakeout?
Sorry.
On some charts, the down bar will give a signal called a test after a shakeout, but I don't see a shakeout bar in the background. Is the down move leading up to that bar considered the shakeout?
Well, a shakeout, you'll see it when it comes, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to have a shakeout. But most of these down moves you see, especially the S&P 500, is some form of shakeout, some sort of test. And if it's down on narrow spreads, close in the middle or even high, usually in the middle, and the volume is less than the previous two, then that means that the supply has dried up, disappeared. Now there is such a thing which I'd like to show you today, which we don't dwell on too much, is what we call bullish volume and bearish volume. Now bullish volume, now very few people in the world understand and even know what volume is. That's why you get loads of companies around the world send out charts with no volume, because they think, well, nobody understands it, we don't, so why bother to put it there, right? But for us, it's vital. And there is such a thing called bullish volume and bearish volume. Bullish volume is increasing volume on up bars while decreasing on down bars. That's why in a bullish market, you get pushing up through supply right to the left, while you get down bars on testing, and just what I've told you now, no supply. Now the opposite is bearish volume, which is quite logical. Right? Bearish volume is increasing volume on down bars while decreasing on up bars. And that decreasing on up bars, it's that what allows you to have things like up thrust, look, and things like that, and no demand, right? Now, I'd like to give you an example of that. Can you put the daily chart up, Peter, of the S&P 500? There it is. Now, that's the S&P 500. See how the trading system works? This is a daily chart. Blue, up, up. Well, there, look. Blue, up, 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 up. Right? Okay, now, how do we know when that's going to suddenly turn bearish or bullish? Put the KG chart up, Peter, please. The S&P 500, there it is. Now, that's what we call a KG chart, look. Right? And what it does, when the volume is bullish, it colors those lines, or the up or down bar, green. Now, if we go back, look, on that little low, look, when it came off, look, there's the red bars showing that the volume has now become bearish. But, as I warned you last week, it can change very quickly. Now, what produces bearish volume is if you look down at the volume below, it's decreasing on up bars. That means it's less than the previous two bars, look, or certainly less than the previous bar. There's the previous bar, right? There's an up bar. It's bearish volume because, look, it's fallen off. There's no demand. Right, so market falls, but this is still bearish volume, look, because the volume now increases. Right, but I warned you last week. I said this can change. You're looking at it direct as it happens. There's no time delay. There's no moving average, nothing like that. What you see is what you're getting, look. Red up bar, right, but now, right here, look, suddenly it changes. This is why you've got to pay attention, look. This is the first down bar on that little area here, where the volume is obviously low, look. And then the next up bar, look, it's increased. That's bullish volume, look. There it is in front of you, staring you in the face, look. There's nothing fancy there. There's no averages, nothing like that. It's what you see is what you get, look. Down bar, volume is low, less, bullish volume. It's decreasing volume on down bars while increasing on up bars. So it's gone from red, look here, up to green. Sorry folks, phone goes. Anything important? No. So that's all right. Won't bother you there. Okay. So then we got a nice up bar look, but look how the volume's increasing. Oh. Here, look. Bullish volume increase on up bars while decreasing on down bars. And there's the decrease, look. So you immediately know you're in a bullish market again for the time being. And there it goes, expanding on up bars. Right? And the chart takes up to there, look. But this is what we call a KG chart. And I've got a suspicion you could almost trade on this. And you would be ill-advised to trade, certainly, against bullish or bearish volume, as you can see. So it's well worth looking at. Well worth. If this is bullish, right, you don't go short or anything like that. But, as I warned you last week, it can change because this is what it's looking at. There's no averages here. There's nothing like that. As soon as it goes bearish, it'll go red. But that'll warn you more or less straight away. Now, unfortunately, we've only got the KG chart on end of day charts. The reason for that is that when I originally had the programmer working on this, I knew this was, I knew this worked, but I didn't really believe it works so well as this. So I'm so busy doing other things. But I've been looking at this the last year, and it's quite amazing, to be quite honest. But we never got around to doing it on the intraday charts. So you only get this KG at the moment on end of day charts, which is a very good program, by the way, very good. I've had many people say to me, it's a hell of a tool to own if you're a stock trader, this end of day. Gavin sent out 2 alerts yesterday or the day before, one to go long on the S&P and one was to short natural gas. But he sends out these alerts. Okay. Now, is there any question about these KG charts? Hang on.
There are 2 questions. One is, why are there sometimes 2 lines per day and sometimes only 1 on the KG chart? And Thomas says, what time frame would you look at KG charts on an intraday if you could? 15-minute or 30-minute? Because he says they can look at it on NinjaTrader.
Well, I always say that these different time frames, they all tell a story. We don't say, right, you've got to look at this or you've got to look at that. It's up to you as a trader that you develop to decide what you personally like. But all these time frames work, even down to a minute. You can follow these market on minute charts. And so it's up to you as you develop your skill at reading these charts and your skill as a trader. So there's no must or what should I look at. I mean, you can look at all of them. But obviously the longer time frame, I personally like to look at the hour. We're more interested in scalping. That is, you know, make a few points and then sort of go off and do something else. That type of thing. Hour charts. I always look at daily charts as well, because the daily chart is like a look at the roadmap. Where are we going? And believe me, at times, there's indications on that S&P 500 that are too good to miss. And but see, that's another hurdle in your trading. I mean, even if you get used to reading these charts, you're sitting there, right? The market's been falling in a bear market, right? The news is all bad, and suddenly it's a green arrow. But because it's taken you by surprise, really, you're not geared up to thinking going long. You think, oh, well, that's interesting. We'll wait and see what happens. And then they have, actually Gavin coined a term, the gotcha bar. And you see what they do is when you get the place to really trade long or short, usually the next bar or two is a wide bar either up or down, closing right on the high or the low. And why we call it a gotcha bar is because you think, here, don't forget, professional money are fully aware of the response that what we call the herd, that is all the small-time traders out there and even the larger banks and that, they know what influence that move is going to have on them. They know. I always say, well, it's a bit of a corny line now, but imagine you're in a theater, right? The fire chief walks onto the stage, holds his hands up, and says, "Don't panic, there's a bomb in here somewhere," right? Now, as a professional fireman, he'll know, and you'll know, immediately there'd be panic. People would be rushing out to the doors and so on and so on. Professional money is just as aware of what the public, the small traders especially, are going to do when they mark this up or down or on news. That's why they use news. It's not the news that actually shifts the market. It's professional money marking up and down on the news for impact. I mean, some of the news is ridiculous when you think about it. And so it makes slightest difference to the stocks in the S&P 500. But they're still marking up and down on it because of the impact. They know they can make some money out of it.
Okay, so that other question was, why are there sometimes 2 lines per day and sometimes only 1 on the KG chart?
2 lines a day.
Yeah.
I mean, to be quite honest, I'm not sure, because I describe bullish or bearish volume to the programmer, and his skill at programming developed this. I don't want to be a programmer, you know. I don't need to be a programmer. But all that detail, like now Gregory in Moscow, he's the boy. He'll spot all this sooner or later. And you will have KG charts on all the intraday time frames and so on and so on. But it does track the movements. I mean, sometimes, the market doesn't go down in a day. It goes up, and that's it. Therefore, you're only going to have one line, aren't you? Up. A green line. But if it zigzags, it goes up and then falls, then goes up, then you might get different down bars. That's probably, well, that's the logical reason for that.
So, right, so Gregory is saying KG or KAGI waves are based on number of ticks to reverse the waves. If the number of ticks to the opposite direction is reached, then the wave is changed. There might be serial changes in one day. Several, sorry, hang on. Right, okay. Did you hear that, Tom? Yeah. So, yeah. Eileen says, I have KG intraday charts on Infinity Charts along with the VSA scanner. And there are two more questions. How do you determine the box size? And for the green line, is this the spread of the price or the close of the price?
I didn't understand the one. I said
The
again.
first one was how do you determine the box size?
Well, all this, how do we do this, is up to you as a user. You will get to know exactly the best box size for you personally. You'll be able to test them, look at them, and you probably start seeing things I don't see. It's a very fascinating subject. But Gregory, the programmer, just what did he say, Rita?
I've lost it now.
Okay.
So it's all based on ticks.
All based on ticks.
That's why it's not straightforward one day or.
That's why it's not straightforward.
1 day, 2 days.
Oh, I see. Yeah. But whatever it is, it works. I mean, that's the main thing. It works. When you see that bullish volume, you'd be ill-advised to be short the market or be going the opposite direction. Be very ill-advised. And we know it works. That's the thing. We don't use the open because we don't use mathematical formulas. And mathematical formulas usually need the open. They need an anchor, shall we say, to work out this and that. We don't use formulas. For a simple reason is, this is my personal opinion. Excuse me if I'm wrong. But out there are some many very clever people. You know, very clever indeed. And not only are they clever, they've got money backing them. Right? Now, if there was a formula of simple mathematics, which would be simple to them, if there was something they could rely on, it actually worked, then it would never exist because they, as soon as it started to develop, they trade it out of existence. Now, the only reason why these formulas look good in hindsight is because insufficient people have traded it. That's what I'm fairly certain is going on. And that's one reason why I've never, ever looked at the formulas. They're in there in the program, a lot of them, because people in the past, they've asked for them. So, okay, programmer, put it in. But I certainly don't recommend it. I never look at them. But that's my opinion. Any more questions, Rita?
Yes. Harvey saying on these charts, how do you read decreasing bearish volume that reaches a new high? No demand.
Yeah.
On a KG. I think that's what he's talking about. How do you read decreasing bearish volume that reaches a new high? A KG chart.
Does it work that way?
It's not quite the same as it is, just a matter of the direction. Yeah, but, hi Harvey, you're not quite sure we understand your question fully. In terms of, let me just read that again. Where my glasses gone?
Oh, Gregory's putting a suggestion.
So Gregory has put in something here saying if the volume on up Kagi wave is low, this is no demand. So Tom says that sounds right. Does that answer your question, Harvey?
Is that Harvey in Dallas, Texas?
Is that Harvey in Dallas, Texas?
Harvey Woods, this is.
No. Well, it might be, but it's not the Harvey. Tom was thinking of. Does that answer your question, Harvey? Any more questions, Rita?
TP is asking, how do they hold the market up in order to unload their positions? Seems like they have to unload to retailers at a zero-sum level so that the market is still up on the same amount of longs, except now some of the longs are in the weak holders' hands until they get rid of all their longs. As the end of it all, there are still the same amount of longs. They're just in the weak holders' hands, and then all they have to now do is sell more contracts to push it over the edge.
That sounds good. Yes, I've asked that question to Tom some time ago, and his response was similar to that, but particularly along the lines of that when the big money, the smart money, stop supporting something, then it's likely to fall, of course. Is that right, Tom? Tom's nodding. So yes, good point.
A little while ago, Eileen asked, what time frames do you like to use to scalp?
Right, scalping is more true to my heart. What I like to do, I always like to look at the daily chart first. Gives me an idea what's going on. Don't forget, the S&P 500 is the cash market. That means that's where the equity lies. That's where the value lies. That's where the money lies, right? So it's important you look at that, and you get some fantastic signals and indications from time to time. You look at that chart, but it's very good at giving you an idea where it's going. Okay, that's a daily chart. That's where the equity lies. Don't forget, the future is a derivative of the cash market, and the people trading the cash market obviously trade the future as well. And because they're a devious lot, they're a cunning lot, right? They know that certain buy or sell in the cash market is going to affect the future. And I know for a fact, I've seen them do it, that they start buying or selling the future sometimes before the actual cash deal is done. And that's why occasionally you might see the future tear off and the cash follows. But that's the reason for that. But I use the daily chart, see what I can see in that. Right. The principles, if you understand them, are practically always 100% correct. Right. And then I look at an hour chart usually. An hour seems to be, or 30-minute chart as we had up when you started. That's quite good too. But check those time frames, hour, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes. But don't forget, the lower time frames you get, you are more likely to be whipsawed than using a longer time frame like an hour or so. But also the 4-hour is very informative. You look at the 4-hour chart. Very informative.
Eileen says, thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. We've got one more question on KG charts. Cargy, is there? Well, they're having an argument here as to whether it's KG or Cargy. Tom, is there a specific advantage of KG Cargy charts over conventional bar charts?
Well, the advantage is use the KG chart, or as Peter says, Cargy. It's Japanese. If we've got a Japanese customer, he'll probably tell us the correct way to pronounce it. Of course, the advantage you've got using a KG chart is you can see immediately whether the market suddenly goes bullish or bearish. And you would be very ill-advised to trade against that. You need to trade what we say in harmony with that. But persevere, keep plugging away, and it will gradually become clear to you. It's like anything new. Remember that when you master this and see it, you'll be one of very few people in the world that can do that. And why that is, I can't tell you why. Professional money certainly look at it, or most of them, not all of them, but most of them do. But it works. And if you look at the signals that the program automatically produce on looking at the volume and the spread and the close and the relative volume, if you think that they're fairly good, right, then we must be telling you the truth. Computers are not capable of lying. They're not capable of coming to any gut feeling. They do just what you told them to do. And you either got it right or you haven't.
Okay, can we look at gold daily and weekly charts for Ming? That's the daily chart.
I don't follow gold closely, but when I look at that and say, wow, widespread up, it's now overbought. And it does seem to go in the opposite direction to the S&P 500. In other words, when that shoots up like that, the S&P usually is weak, apparently. But we do have a signal here. There's a test, look. That's a test, what they call a test in a rising market, right? You can all see it's a VSA principle. There would be accumulation down here on these lows. What time frame is this, Peter? Day. There'd be accumulation down here, which would be more apparent in your shorter time frames. But whenever you see this test like this, you must assume that market's going up. I mean, you may look at this and say, oh, wow, it looks like an upthrust, look. Looks like weakness. Looks like it's hit the top trend line. But professional money have seen that, they tested, look. And that, whenever you see these tests, you must pay attention to that. Test in a rising market, that's one of our well-known signals. And then please read the dialog box here. Okay. Tell you all about it, well, as much as we know. We don't hold any secrets. We don't keep anything back from you. We never lie to you, of course, anything like that. We just show you what's going on with the supply and demand. But whenever you see those tests like that, you should pay attention. Now, well, it would be weekly. Now that gunning up like that could be pushing up through what we call supply to the left, because locked in these highs, there'd be thousands of traders that have been locked in and have become what when the market falls away, what we call weak holders. A weak holder is a trader that if he sold right now would lose money. Now these traders don't like that idea. So they think to themselves, right, if that ever comes back up here to this level, I'm out. Right? Professional money know that. They know what they're thinking. But professional money, it costs them a lot of money to buy all this off them if they were bullish. So what they do, they have a widespread up, right? Because when when all these locked-in traders look at this, a lot of them say, "Oh, look, it's going up now. I'm holding my position. I'm not selling now." Right? And that's what professional money want. Because if they were naive enough to get locked into this, they'd do the same at higher levels. What's the KG chart look like on this? Oh yeah. So that's all bullish, isn't it? Well, there's your red bars, look. Then note how it suddenly switches, look. So I said last week, it was switches quickly, look. I mean, there's no moving average, there's nothing. In other words, what you see is what you're getting. That bullish volume suddenly appears, look. So you need to be alert of that. In other words, its bullish volume is increasing volume on up bars while decreasing on down bars. Well, that's certainly increasing. I can't see it very well, but that's certainly increasing on up bars. Okay. Of gold? What, the bar chart? Yes.
First question on this one is from Jordan. On that test, the volume is not lower than the previous two bars. And then TP is saying, on that gold chart, when you see that widespread up bar that looks obviously overbought, how do you know to stay in a position and go with it for a swing higher or to exit a position and lock in profits? One of the hardest things is to stay with a trade and know how long to hold. Any comments? So the first one is about that test volume, and then
Well, you're quite right observation there. In a true test, right, we'd like to see the volume less than the previous two. However, when you're almost overbought up here and you've seen a bit of an up move, right, there's a lot of nervous traders around. And therefore, but here, you've got to believe that test. It's a really strong looking test, isn't it? I mean, it's a powerful looking test. And it's after what looks apparent like a bit of weakness here. Right. Now, as far as this here, this markup, we know that there's some old levels to the left here. And we know that professional money, if they're bullish, which they probably are because of this test, look, and this buying down here, which you'd have to see smaller time frames to pick out, right? That this is pushing up through what we call supply to the left. Now, if this is true, then along here, 1 or 2 bars, you'll see another test. If you see another looking bar looking something like this, right, but especially if the volume is low, long here somewhere, then that's going up. If it's genuinely bearish, which somehow I don't think it is, right, you're liable to see up bars on no demand, and they won't test. That's how I look at that.
Okay, so that's time's up, folks. Anything more to say, Rita?
no, just say yes, this is being recorded.
Yeah, we're recording this, and I've discovered a shortcut in putting it up on the server, so I'll be doing that in the next half an hour. In the past have been delayed because it's been a bit of a fiddle, but I've seen a new way of doing it. Newsletter on Sunday, of course, which you can get from the VSA Club. Anything to say, Tom?
Well, I won't say good luck. There's no such thing as luck in trading, but believe and understand the principles.
Yeah, Tom, you repeat that.
I was going to say, you don't say goodbye, everybody, good luck, because there's no such thing as luck in this trading. You either get the principles correct or you don't. There's no luck attached to it at all. You'd be well advised to do nothing until you fully understand the principle. And then now, these days, you're lucky in a way you can get platforms where you can trade right to your heart's consent without losing any money. Practice. And if you can practice and do that, I mean, that's another discipline that's difficult to get hold of, paper trading. We used to call it paper trading. A lot of people, I can't be bothered with that. Because the trouble is, see, men, especially men, they like taking risks. They enjoy taking risks. And I suppose more so than women. Now, men, I suppose that's built into them from the caveman days. Because if they stood at the edge of their spear of the cave, right, if they weren't prepared to take a little bit of risk, they would go hungry. Where the women didn't want to do that, they're looking after the children. They don't take risks. And that's why a lot of women make better traders than men. Men enjoy taking risks, so be careful. Because I said earlier, usually you're the weak link, right? But if you learn it properly, then you'll never ever regret it, because you'll have that skill with you for the rest of your life. On that, I'll say goodbye, good night for today, and we'll be doing the newsletter Sunday.